Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I'd like to discuss the twin issue of an emerging and expected shortage of food in Britain this summer, along with a hinted at imminent dropping of food standards, which you'd like to think aren't connected, but it does make you wonder. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So food shortages are starting to be noticed now. You're not seeing much of it mentioned in the media. I'm certainly not on this occasion. Actually, might not be a bad thing. A rush to panic buy is hardly going to help matters. And I talked about this before because the logistics industry were warning us about it in advance. It's not down to a sudden increase in demand and panic buying as we saw during the first pandemic wave. That was an issue of like people working at home and therefore needing more food in, and then a bit of panic added on top. So that was demand outstripping supply, simple as that. It's not even an issue of a total lack of supply, which is still a serious risk for the future. That is still a risk of a hard Brexit, that trade barriers make it much more difficult to import the food we have in. We would have supply issues with imports if the government applied checks at our borders. In a week's time, they were supposed to be, but they put those off. They're not doing them. More about that later, though. This is an issue entirely, as far as I'm aware, down to a shortage of workers, lorry drivers, warehouse operatives, and so on. As such, it's arguably the least serious of the three possible causes of shortages. And because when people panic buy, you can end up with no staple foods for those who actually can't afford to pay higher prices. If you've got a shortage of imports, the same sort of consequence. Because this is effectively down to distribution, delivery, supermarkets and logistics companies who are not as dumb as the government can prioritise. They can manage the whole thing. The images I've got in the background are what some people kindly photographed for me from 3 supermarkets in my local area. And what you can see, first of all, what I notice is a lot of the same sort of things in short supply in all the 3 different supermarkets. But you can also see something, it's like there are shortages of dog food, there's shortages of toilet rolls, but you can still get dog food and you can still get toilet rolls. So it might be that you can't get the particular brand that you want, or you can't get the particular type that you want, but you can get something from that category. There are shortages of bread in some of them. I suppose it's more of a worry, but there are still bread products. So I'd still say that any shortages of important grocery items does run the risk of hitting those in or close to food poverty hardest. If I go in with my shopping list, for example, if I can't get what I went in for, there's a big hole where they usually are, I can get some substitutes. I'll come away with the shopping I need. It may not be exactly what I wanted. It might be more expensive than what I was going to get. It may not be what I went in for, but that's not a serious concern for me. In the past, when I had £6 a week to spend on food, I didn't actually have to worry about shortages. I'd never experienced these sort of things. What I went in for was always there, which is just as well because there wasn't really much leeway for getting something else if it wasn't. A few shortages would have had me in real trouble. So I do worry about that for those in that situation. But where this does become serious is because it's not a blip. Without any understanding of the underlying issue, you could just look at this as food shortages. You said there wouldn't be food shortages. There's food shortages on those shelves there in the supermarkets of Britain. There's your evidence that Brexit is impacting our lives. Okay, and you don't really get to say, but I can still buy my basket of groceries. The bar for success for Brexit is not supposed to be, I'm still alive. It's supposed to be, our life is better now. Well, it's not, it's worse. But you might sort of look at that and go, oh, what's that? We've got shortages. Oh, it's because we told 70,000 EU-based lorry drivers to bugger off out of our country. That was stupid. The government are going to have to deal with that now, aren't they? And you bob along thinking it's an embarrassment for Brexit. It's going to be embarrassing this summer. When fewer people can go on holiday, so they're going to vacation why did I say that? That's what Americans say. I've been watching too much American telly. When you holiday in this country, it's because they call them staycations, isn't it? And then you're putting more pressure on hotels and restaurants who then need to get in more food, more shortages, all gets into a big old mess. But it will sort itself out and most of us won't starve. But I'm not seeing signs that anyone in the industry thinks it's going to sort itself out. In fact, the concerns are that this is just the beginning. You know, the way to try and understand what is happening with Brexit, or indeed anything in politics, is to listen to those who work at the coalface, so to speak. So if you want to know what's going on with distribution, listen to those who are heavily involved in it, preferably those who've been involved in it for decades, because they, even before the EU came into being, because they can then tell you how it changed when the single market was set up, and then, you know, what was inevitably going to happen when it disappeared for us. You know, I listen to a few people regularly. You know, you've got Richard Burnett of the Road Haulage Association reported on some of the things he said a few times. Same with Shane Brennan of the Coal Storage Federation. There's another chap on Twitter, a chap called Michael, wealth of useful information. I'll put a link to a particular thread in the description below. And he was reminding us about how he complained about the problem of our trade collapse some time ago. And it all happened exactly as he said it was. Now, this isn't related specifically to the distribution problems here, but bear with me, all part of the same mindset. You can read the thread yourself, but the simple issue, so I don't labour it too much, is that we do not have people in Britain who understand how to trade with the EU as third countries. It's as simple as that. We don't have the people. The EU did not introduce red tape for our businesses. It removed it. Dealing with international trade is quite a specialised skill. And it's one that most of our businesses have not needed. And bear in mind, the vast majority of businesses in this country are small operations. They can't just hire someone to sort it out for them. You know, you could run a business in the single market with a complete absence of that particular skill set. Didn't need it. So what happens when that knowledge is suddenly needed? Overnight as well. No implementation period, overnight. Businesses are completely lost. You know, he sets out very clearly your two options as the government, you know, that need to deal with it. One, you can massively expand your facilities, hire loads of new customs agents to manage it. You create simple and effective IT systems that will help businesses who are ignorant of what's needed to trade as a third country through the painful process. Or secondly, you don't do that. Our government chose the latter. Now, they claimed last year that they were pursuing the former, but details on progress were always scant. It's like, Michael Gove, how many of these 50,000 customs agents have you recruited then? Oh, you don't know? Right, okay. A few months later, how many then? Oh, you still don't know, okay. Turns out it was just another Brexit lie. Now, this is an example of how the government refused to deal with the expected inevitable problems with post-Brexit trade. But again, linking back to this issue with distribution, it's the same mindset in play over our problems with internal logistics. And I keep thinking to myself, as many of you must do, there must surely be some things that the government know they need to deal with to get away with Brexit, because otherwise they're just exposing its ugly underbelly. And yet, time after time, when you just think to themselves, but if you don't deal with this thing, you're just exposing Brexit. Why wouldn't you want to hide Brexit? Time after time, they just don't. And I don't know if it's because they think they can ride out any disaster by now, because at the end of the day, positive reinforcement. It doesn't seem to matter how badly they cock something up. Look at where they are in the polls. And yeah, every now and then I'll go, oh, they've gone down in the polls. And then they're back up again. They lost a by-election recently, but they're probably going to win a by-election next week. You know, it just the positive. This is already a group of grifters who spent their entire lives never having to face the consequences for mistakes. So it's like they do a thing in their life. They've just been doing things and doing things and doing things. Sometimes they've had a big payout as a result of it, and they've never had negative consequences. So in their brains, inevitably, it just makes them think, if anything does go wrong, I can ride it out. And then every now and then I'll get a big payday out of it. You know, So is it just that? Is it just that they think they don't care how badly something goes because they will still profit? Or is it that they are genuinely clueless about what's going on because they refuse to listen to experts because Boris Johnson can't stand the doom and gloom? So we have a problem in that we can get goods, including food, into the country because we're not doing any checks at the border, but we are struggling to distribute it because the cause of that problem isn't being dealt with. The problem itself isn't being dealt with. You know, this is why the logistics industry, the people who actually understand what's going on, are not optimistic for the summer or beyond. Then we get, earlier this week, David Frost again refused to accept the EU's offer of a temporary veterinary agreement. Now, I talked about this offer before on more than one occasion. Yes, it is incompatible with the Australia deal and would be incompatible with an eventual US trade deal, which means we import goods of lower standards than the EU allows. But the EU had offered a temporary agreement, no fixed dates, none of this you're locked in for so long. We could use it just for as long as we needed and cancel it at any time. Absolute madness that we wouldn't accept that. But Frost said this week that the reason for refusing it is because the short term might turn out to be quite short term. Now, let's be honest, if the deal would only last until the end of this year, that would still give us a significant amount of breathing space. Remember, such a deal would get rid of the vast majority of all checks between Britain and Northern Ireland. Even if it's only temporary, why wouldn't you take it to just give yourself that time to at least advance the systems before we had to pull out of it again? That Frost is resisting this deal and that he is saying that the short term might be even more short term than we're thinking strongly suggests that we are about to drop our food standards very, very soon. Now, I did wonder with the haste of the Australian deal if it might even be this year. And then I thought, is this how the government think they're going to solve our food shortages? Because although I believe that the government may not have understood the issue with logistics, because they don't bother talking to the industry very much, they are certainly aware of the problems with imports. They know that they can't carry on just not checking goods coming in from the EU. They know that. People are going to get pissed off. At the very least, China and the US are going to not leave it alone at some point. At the same time, we're making no progress on being ready for those checks, to the point where you'd imagine that the government aren't even trying to get ready. But if we're not ready and then apply those checks, instant food shortages. Severe food shortages, in fact. And then you think, is this the government's plan just to import food from Asia? You know, when they said to replace our trade with the EU with Asia, were they talking less about exports, which is how we grow our economy, or even just maintain it, and more about imports, you know, which is how we eat? I mean, it sounds mad to me, but I need a logical path here. The problem is we have to apply checks on EU goods across our borders at some point. We cannot actually just leave our borders open forever. I don't know when realistically. The government say from January 2022. But that's the same government that initially said would be doing those checks from January 2021. Then they put it back to July 2021. Then they put it back again. But at some point we have to. At that point, the EU will struggle to export food to us, just as we struggle to export food to them now. Only in the EU, they didn't have severe food shortages because they're part of a huge market that just went, oh, we can't get the stuff in from Britain, I'll just buy it somewhere else. We're part of a market that's smaller than the UK. We struggle. We can see that we struggle. So the logic has to work like this. We import half our food from Europe, but there are going to be trade barriers soon. So we've got two options. We either lower those trade barriers. No, that's not happening. Or we get food from elsewhere. Well, importing from another continent will mean higher transport costs. Now, there are already 8 million people in the UK in food poverty. Okay, so we import cheaper, lower quality food to offset the extra costs of transport. Good plan, let's go with that. Of course, that doesn't deal with the issue of not enough lorry drivers or other workers to get it from distribution centres to supermarket shelves, but it's possible that they genuinely didn't see that one coming. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.